Any moment.
Should be coming up there, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Big favorite. And then we'll like watch something that's kind of interesting. We don't do It's a Wonderful Life, which is our favorite. We're such geeks over It's a Wonderful Life. In my formal dining room right now, I have my train set up. I have 24 lighted houses that are all for Bedford Falls, Gower Drug, Bailey Building Alone, Bedford Falls in my dining room.
That's awesome.
You got to show them the video of the trains. I remember you.
I shoot one every year.
Set up.
Yep. Shoot one every year. Put the GoPro on the train, send it around the track. I mean, we got everything. We got the people leading the band for Harry Bailey's homicide. Oh yeah. I don't even want to know how much money I have invested in ceramic houses and figurines. Goddamn, that we look at for 28 days a year.
Yeah. But we're having fun, right?
So they say.
We have one microphone here, huh?
Yeah, look at this. You guys are uptown. You have a mulch box here. This is
a teamwork.
big stuff.
I don't hear anything.
So, is everybody ready?
Hold on 1 second, Sheriff, please.
Did the mic just go out?
Yeah, the audio keeps kind of jumping in and out.
Yeah, I think they might have.
Yeah.
Back.
You guys have it now?
It's going in and
jumping
out.
in and out. But why though?
We might have more microphones than you think.
That's what I was thinking. So take your time.
That kind of sounded good when he was talking. Yeah, sure, fine then. Sheriff, talk for us.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Test.
Yeah, it's coming in now.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Is it a bad cable?
Yeah, do you need to go get the, you have a little rack?
I'm running off battery too. Could be that.
Oh, yeah, if that box is battery operated, that could be it.
Go get the rack?
Get it. Get it.
He's gonna get his mic back out of the car. Channel whoever the shit is.
Orange County has the Feel Good holiday store today, right? Well, the
Just saying, the buttons are missing off there.
Say.
Oh, just two dead bodies. The mom and her son, like a teenage son. You know what? It was funny. I was telling I got a wire. Yeah, that's how so there's like some like dangerous substance inside. It's weird.
Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I carry you. Oh, here's one.
Alright. Everybody hooked in?
Yep. We're ready for you, Sheriff.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a premeditated murder that occurred here in Seminole County, actually at 1917 South Boulevard in unincorporated Maitland. It's down off of Oxford Road in Seminole County. Just before midnight last night, we received a call from an eyewitness that indicated that they walked back into their home and witnessed what appeared to be at least a dead individual that was on the ground. The roommates that were involved is going to be Jake Bolata, who has been charged with first-degree premeditated murder, Ian McClurg, who has also been charged with first-degree premeditated murder, and then a witness in this case, Walter Johnson, who was actually out on a Tinder date and came back to the location. I say that because as I tell the story, I'll use their names as we go. Our decedent, who has not been positively identified as of yet, and as such, their next of kin has not been contacted. So during this news conference, I will not be releasing his name as of yet. Was there in an acquaintance and actually lived at the location at one time. He had established residency there for at least a 2-week period, but had been evicted for at least 2 weeks, so he was not a current resident at the location. The other 3 individuals, Jake, Ian, and Walter, did live in the home, and they were having conversations. Jake and Ian were having conversations about a potential burglary that had occurred a few days earlier. They suspected that the decedent, or the victim in this particular case, had broken back into the home in an effort to burglarize and take a PlayStation 4 from the home. That really aggravated Jake, and Jake and Ian had made plans to try to get him lured back over under the premise that they were going to come together and go to a party. They were texting back and forth and ultimately got the decedent to come back to the home right around midnight. And at that time, Jake met the individual armed with a 7-inch chef's knife, a very aggressive blade, 7-inch steak knife, got him inside of the house and stabbed the decedent multiple times. When the third party, Walter, arrived on scene, he was out on a Tinder date. He was coming back to the home, actually walked in, and as he walked into the house, Ian had the knife in his hand, and Jake was in the process of placing the body inside plastic garbage bags. There was a mop and a mop handle and duct tape that was in the general area, but the plan was to kill him, put him in plastic bags, and then find some place to bury him. As soon as Walter came in and noticed this, he immediately went back to the car. His date was still inside the car. He contacted 911, and the sheriff's office responded just a few moments later. At the time the sheriff's office arrived on scene, Walter barricaded himself inside the bathroom, and Jake took a flea out of the back of the home and was located by the assistance of our alert helicopter, the assistance of the Altamont Springs Police Department, and Seminole County deputies at the corner of O'Brien Road and 1792. There's a 7-Eleven there.
Ian barricaded himself in the bathroom? Wouldn't Walter have been out in the car with
You're right,
date?
Ian.
Okay.
Ian barricaded himself in the bathroom. As soon as Walter got back to the car, immediately contacted 911, and we were able to make contact with Walter to get all of the details of what was going on. So on the inside of the home, we'll be out there for the next few days. We're obviously forensically examining. The decedent is still there. I said that there's pause on positively identifying them because the medical examiner is responding, and there's plastic bags and all of those things. We do have a search warrant to get into the house. We're inside the house already. We'll probably be there for the next couple of days. There was drugs located in the house. However, the drugs do not appear to be a motive at this time based on what we know and the key eyewitnesses in here. It looks like Jake primarily was aggravated on the theft of the PlayStation, and they attracted the decedent back to the home under the premise that they were going out and going to have a party, and then ultimately committed the premeditated murder with the use of the 7-inch chef's knife, and then tried to dispose of the body.
So Jake, Ian, and Walter were all roommates in this house?
Yes, they were all. Walter was a new roommate. Jake and Ian were there. We know that earlier in the day, Jake and Ian were planning to use violence, and at one time planning to murder the decedent.
So this guy basically was living there. They had some kind of issue, and he moved out or was thrown out.
they thought he broke back into the house and stole something of theirs, so they lured him back there for revenge.
Exactly. They lured him back there for revenge. He had been a resident with them for 2 weeks. He had been evicted by them 2 weeks. And it's believed that they believe that he committed a burglary 2 days ago. And the item that was taken was a PlayStation 4.
You know, we all remember the Deltona story where the guys were bludgeoned to death over a pair of sneakers and a PlayStation. This is so similar to that I guess what you guys are alleging is that a human life was lost over a couple of $100s in a video game console.
It is the most bizarre and disgraceful act that one can imagine. And Dave, I'll tell you, right before I walked down here, we were making the direct correlation to the Deltona case over these gaming systems and things that have little value, definitely no association with the value of human life whatsoever. It is just absolutely bizarre. We also know that Jake was arrested in Connecticut, I think it was October 18th, on weapons charge. We don't know the outcome of that. We're working with authorities in Connecticut right now, but we know that he was out, obviously, but had been arrested on October 18th for weapons and drugs charges in Connecticut.
Have these two men offered any kind of explanation for their behavior?
The investigators are still talking with them now, but it looks like the pure motive from what we've been able to gain is revenge on the burglary. That is the motive in this particular case. The report from Ian was Jake was so upset earlier in the day that he was punching holes in the wall, and he was doing whatever he could to get this individual back over there so he can take revenge out on the burglar.
So you believe Jake was the primary aggressor?
Yeah, I believe Jake was the primary person that was doing the stabbing with the knife, but both Jake and Ian had pre-planned this. Ian's position was to grab him in the event that he was going to run, to tackle him, to not let him leave the scene. So they're both equally responsible in this thing, but it looks like at this point in time, in the early stages of the investigation, that Jake was the one that had the knife in his hand, at least at that particular moment. Now, when Walter came in, Ian had the knife in his hand. So again, as this investigation progresses and we have the opportunity to evaluate all aspects of physical evidence on the scene and talk to additional witnesses, we'll know more about the bizarre accounts of what happened last night as this thing continues.
How important is this third roommate? I mean, without him, he could have played along and just went along with his roommates. How important was he in all this? We're calling you guys.
Well, I tell you, it's of critical importance. You know, obviously this is a tragedy. Anytime that you have a loss of human life, it is an absolute tragedy. But I am also extremely grateful, not only for Walter walking in and doing the right thing, immediately reporting this to law enforcement. I'm also very grateful for the courageous law enforcement officers who responded immediately by air and ground, and the collaboration between the Altamaha Springs Police Department and Sheriff's Office to apprehend Jake, who was in a business, no shoes on, obviously fleeing the area so quickly. Within 30 minutes, we had one of the primary murder suspects apprehended. So again, it's a tragedy, but the results are as good of a scenario as you could want for the good guys.
Sheriff, are all these people college students? All these guys college students?
I don't know, and I don't believe that they were college students. I don't believe. You know, they have minor criminal history. Jake was on probation here in Seminole County for misdemeanor probation. We've just learned of the charges in Connecticut, drugs and weapons charges in Connecticut. We don't know what the disposition is on that, but it doesn't appear that any of these individuals have extensive criminal history. But it does not appear that they were college students. Drugs inside the house, but at this point in time, we don't know if those drugs had any correlation. Actually, we don't believe it had any correlation to this particular act.
Was there anybody else living in the house, or was it just the
Yeah, there's one other individual that was living in the house. His first name is CJ. He was off at work. He was not home at the time, and he arrived after he got off of work and had no understanding, had not been exposed to any conversations that we believe up into this. But there was one other person there.
You say they suspected the victim of burglary. Have you been able to confirm whether or not that was even true?
You know, they suspected. We have not been able to confirm that because no report to law enforcement was ever made. And they concluded that by sharing some text messages back and forth amongst the 3 or 4. I guess somewhere along the path there was a text message indicating that the decedent had possession of the PlayStation 4. But it's still early stages in this. We'll forensically examine, you know, all pieces of evidence to include cell phone communications, etc. But that's how they believe that the burglary had occurred, by sharing of text messages. There was never a report to law enforcement about a burglary.
Sheriff, did they ever say identity of the deceased?
I have not confirmed that as of yet because
sure I missed part of it.
yeah, the medical examiner is still responding. We want to make sure that the family has been contacted before we release that name. Yep.
Sheriff, did they ever say why they evicted him? Why the
I don't know. I don't believe that they had. I know that Walter seemed like he was the roommate replacement. Walter had only been at the residency for just a handful of days, maybe 5 or 6, maybe a week. And it looks like they invited Walter in after they evicted the decedent. And that was 2 weeks ago. I don't know the circumstances of that, but I'm sure that our investigators will pick that up as their investigation continues.
Did they know Walter was coming home and he just maybe came home too early? Or did they think he was spending the night and then he stumbled upon this murder?
No, I don't think that they were expecting Walter to come back at the particular time. Again, Walter still had his date in the car, so he was stopping. It does not appear that he was planning to stay because his date was outside of the car still, so maybe he was just stopping to pick something up, but it does not appear that they were expecting him to come back home.
Had they informed Walter at all about this issue with the PlayStation and the former roommate?
Yeah. Walter did know that a burglary had occurred. At least they believed that a burglary had occurred. They did know that there was aggression and anger, but obviously Walter has been very cooperative with us and had no idea anything like this would ever happen. So again, that will continue as we continue to talk to people, but it does not appear that he had any knowledge that this would occur. Sometimes people blow off steam and they express their anger, but nothing like this.
Sheriff, if you could just back up and repeat, because of the guy yelling in the background, about how this sort of all unfolded. So the guy's on a date, right? Go from there and how he walked into this thing.
So what we have is Walter, who is a relatively new roommate. He's been there for maybe a week or so. He's met somebody on Tinder. He's out on a date with social media contact, and then he actually drives back to the home right around midnight. We don't know why he's at the home, but it doesn't appear that he's there to stay because his date is still out in the car. As he walks into the house, what he sees is Ian holding a knife in his hand, Jake on the floor putting a bloody body inside plastic bags. He immediately sees this, frightened as anybody would be, runs out of the home, gets back in the car, flees the area, and calls 911 and reports that. Moments later, sheriff's deputies arrive on scene. Ian goes into the bathroom and locks the door. Jake flees out of the back of the house, and he's on foot, barefoot, running, trying to avoid apprehension. We later catch him about 30 minutes later in the area of O'Brien Road and 1792, right behind the 7-Eleven that's located there. With the assistance of our aviation, the Altamont Springs Police Department, and Seminole County Sheriff's deputies that are working in the general area. All of the details really came together so quickly because Walter was acting as a law-abiding citizen and reporting this very, very bizarre scene that he walked into. What we later found out was there has been conversations between Jake and Ian earlier in the day that they were going to do whatever they could to lure the decedent over to the house to get revenge. They are absolutely convinced that he has burglarized their home. They're absolutely convinced that the decedent has taken a PlayStation 4, and when he comes there, Jake meets him at the door and has a knife in his hand at that time. They get him inside the house. Ian's position is if he runs from the location, your job is to tackle him and not allow him to leave, and then the fight is on. I can only imagine as we get in there and forensically examine, we're going to see the real harm and damage and how brutal of an attack this was. All over a gaming system, which makes absolutely no sense to any law-abiding citizen. So that's kind of a recap of what happened, what we've been working. We'll be out there for the next few days, following up on interviews of witnesses. The forensics will release the name of the decedent, the victim, as soon as the next of kin is contacted and notified. And our press team will give very specific details on the names of the people that are involved and booking sheets and face sheets or anything like that. We'll also find more about the Connecticut charges as well. Again, October 18th, Jake was charged with weapons and drug charges out of Connecticut, so that's something we're very interested to learn more about as well. Any more questions?
Not to be gruesome, but when you say multiple stab, are we talking 2 or 3, or are we talking a lot more?
We don't know yet.
How vicious.
I suspect it will be a lot more,
Okay.
but when we arrived on scene, I mean, the decedent is in garbage bags. I mean, so until we can get in there and look at it, but it's pretty gruesome.
Had
You're saying
they
garbage
started to dismember him?
No.
So he was in a full,
No,
his body was fully contact.
Well, we think so, but I mean,
Okay.
obviously, from standing with the natural eye, a lot of his body's not exposed to us.
Okay.
So when we pull off anything covering him, we'll have greater detail working with our medical examiner to be sure. But just from my experience in looking at the blood, it obviously looks like more than one stab wound. And we're talking about a big knife. We're talking about a 7-inch chef's knife that it appears that he was very aggressive with. Jake was very aggressive with. So we'll get more details when we get through that. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, can you imagine that girl?
Or the dangerous question.
Yep.
Never know what you do.
Now, I have to find out.
I don't think they've released it.
Oh my God. Victorino, oh God. That had to be from the 90s.
No.